Alright, so moving right along to our next Patreon request. And yeah, this one comes from Bill McLaughlin, who asked me to do a Stormhawks adaptation of a Marvel story. And as you can see, this is Stormhawks Enemy of the State. But before we go any further, as always, if you guys would like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below. Head on over to my Patreon where you guys can hit the 3rd tier, and that'll give you access to allow you to do to send me requests for videos to do here on YouTube. But other than that, yeah, hope you all enjoy this, and let's get started. So the video so this story, while it is called Stormhawks Enemy of the State, the Stormhawks aren't the enemy of the state. It's actually someone else. So this is, yes, an adaptation, tongue-tied. Basically, this is an adaptation of a famous Wolverine story, Wolverine Enemy of the State. So, yeah. So if you don't know what that story is, basically, Wolverine was captured and turned into an agent of both Hydra and the Hand, and he went about attacking several characters from the Marvel Universe, such as Daredevil, the Fantastic Four, basically everyone who was under Fox. You know, let me just say, like, real quick, I always found it funny that, like, every character you saw outside of a few characters like Captain America and a few others, it was every character that Fox could use. And I guess that was the idea at the time, because when this comic had been published, the Fox Marvel deal was really hot. So I imagine, like, they wanted to make this comic as, like, a way to adapt to make it a movie, like a future X-Men or Wolverine solo movie, when they wanted to do, like, an interconnected universe, because it was, like, Daredevil and Fantastic Four, because remember, Daredevil was under Fox for a hot minute as well. So that's what I'm kind of thinking. You know, that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. Could be wrong, but that's what I just felt like. Anyway, so there you go. There's the gist of the story. Let's get into the actual meat of it. So the story begins with Starling, who has been on a solo, after coming back from a solo mission, and she's just returned to her home. Now, her home is like a private, secluded place out in some no-name Terra where she can just sit and brood for a while. She's been throwing herself into her work a lot, and essentially what's been going on is that she's been, you know, asked by the Sky Council, because she's still a Sky Knight, to be, and they were telling her, like, they're telling her basically, hey, we need you on a new squad. We can't do that. You can't keep doing this, you know, shoot from the hip Lone Ranger shit anymore. It's kind of getting annoying. We'd like you to do, you know, other stuff, please. We'd like you to do, we would very much like you to do something else. Like, we want you to be a part of a squad. And she's like, no, I will never be part of another squad, ever. Like, I cannot, you know, you were, like, she basically had this whole thing with the Sky Council where she was like, you weren't there when Repton and the Raptors slaughtered everyone, the other Interceptors. You know, you weren't there when my team was flayed and eaten by the Raptors. So, yeah. Also, she kind of, like, there's this big moment in here, and this is kind of headcanon, where she talks about, like, it's the Sky Council's fault as to why the Interceptors are dead in the first place. Because she basically said, like, she was like, yeah, you know, if you guys didn't Operation Takedown, Operation Twilight, Operation Twilight, then the Interceptors would still be alive. We'll get into what Operation Twilight was in a moment. So Starling has come home, and she's, like, looking for a rest, and that's when she gets surprised by the Dark Ace, as well as several Talons as well. So Starling has to, like, just put, you know, she takes out her weapon, and she begins a all-out fight to try to, you know, stem the tide against them. But eventually she gets beaten down when Nightcrawlers start showing up. And once the Nightcrawlers get involved, that's when, and mixed with Dark Ace, that's when she gets overwhelmed and is captured and taken to Cyclonia. And she's like, well, what is this? Like, she just gets dragged into the throne room with Cyclonus, And she's like, well, what the hell is this? Like, what are you going to do to me? Like, if this is torture, then guess what? I'm not going to talk. And she's like, Master Cyclonus is like, oh, Starling, if it was only torture I was going to put you through, then you'd wish it was. Like, you'd wish it was just that. So it turns out that Master Cyclonus is like, of every Sky Knight I've ever seen, you're probably the most ruthless I've ever heard of. Because it turns out Repton tells her, had told Cyclonus what Operation Twilight was. Operation Twilight was basically the assassination of Repton. It was the Interceptors were sent on a Black Ops mission to assassinate Repton and kill the whole family. Like, it was not just him, but basically take out the government of Bo-Katan, because they were reading the Sky Council was reading reports that Bo-Katan was going to forge an alliance with Cyclonia, and everyone was worried at the idea of both Bo-Katan and Cyclonia working together to combat Atmosia. So they wanted to cut things off at the head, literally, and sent the Interceptors in to assassinate Repton and his other son and his brothers if they could, because if they could kill at least Hork and Lugi, Hork and Lugi, then, or Hork and Spitz and Hork, excuse me, if they could at least kill Spitz and Hork, then at the very least Lugi would be the most innocent and childish and probably not forge the alliance, or at the very least, be so incompetent that Cyclonia wouldn't want to work with them. But the assassination was botched, and Repton killed everyone. So, Starling kind of takes in that, she's been reading reports, she's been stealing, old reports of the Interceptors, and they were like the Wetworks team of Sky Knight. When it came to Wetworks missions, it was the Interceptors that were sent in to do the dirty work in this war. So, she got this idea of, you're a good soldier, but you're being underused, so I want to try something. And she's like, yeah, I'm not switching sides. And she's like, you don't have a choice in this, Starling. So Master Cyclonus uses her power to mind control Starling into working for the Cyclonians, and sends her out to hunt down and take down every major Sky Knight out in the world. And it's still, the thing is, she talks like Starling. She still talks. It's not like I'm brainless and silent. Oh, I still speak. And in fact, in her head, she's still herself. So she's just, it's like watching herself do all these horrible atrocities. So not only does Starling get mind controlled into working for the Cyclonians, but the Cyclonus also gives Starling command of several of her Nightcrawlers. So from there, it's already all over the place that Starling has gone missing. But then a few days later, Terra Rex gets attacked, and Harrier and the Rex Guardians just get torn apart by Starling, and that's when everyone thinks Starling switched sides. Piper, however, and the Stormhawks aren't convinced that Starling would ever willingly switch sides in any situation. At no point would Starling ever, want to switch sides. But Finn, among everyone, Finn is just kind of like, well, maybe she did. Maybe she did want to, maybe she just got tired of losing the war, and maybe that led to her, wanting to, join the winning team. And that's when Arrow's like, I don't think anyone would want to join a winning team when the said winning team killed your old team. I don't think that's how this works. So the Stormhawks set out to try to figure out what's wrong with Starling. Meanwhile, Starling herself is taking on Triton. She's taking on the Amazonians. She's taking on and taking out several Sky Knights along the way. She's murked a few already. But when she gets to Terra Blazaris and counters the Absolute Zeros, that's when Suzy Lu puts up a real fight against her. And during that fight, that's when the Stormhawks arrive as well. And that's when Starling's just like, the mind-controlled Starling, mind you, is like, I see, like, they've brought in the Kitty League now. You know how much... like, she's digging it, like, emotionally trying to dig at everyone as she's fighting them. And she's showing off, like, she can take on them and the Absolute Zeros in just a 1-on-10 fight. And during this whole fight, Starling's just kind of like digging the knife on everyone, especially Piper, who's like, I always found it pathetic that you had this, hero worship for me. It almost felt kind of a crush. So, I don't know about you, but, sorry, kid, you ain't my type. And proceeds to just mop the floor with him until Arrow manages to get the drop on her and knock her out. So from there, they manage to, like, tie her up and find what's wrong with her. Piper uses her crystals to kind of figure out that there's something wrong with her mind. So she has to, like, figure out, a way to properly break whatever hold the Cyclonians have on her. So it takes days to deprogram Starling from this hell that Cyclonus locked her in. And it, like I said, it takes legit days to do that. Until finally, Starling is free after days of just, getting experimented on. She's free of it, but she still remembers all the horrible atrocities she did. And she even is like, yeah, it reminded me of my days with the Interceptors. And I can't be this monster anymore. So... but but she also acknowledges that, like, while I don't want to be this monster anymore, I acknowledge that it's a monster I have to be for this war. So from there, she actually leaves, but now she's open to recreating the Interceptors as a new Wetworks team for the Atmosians, and more so to get back at Cyclonus for fucking with her mind. So there you go, guys. That is Stormhawk's Enemy of the State. Once again, I'd like to thank Bill McLaughlin for this Patreon request. You guys tell me in the comments below, what did you guys think of this story? Comment below, let me know. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.